Good afternoon. This is Leslie Warner. I'm an alumni career coach with Tufts Alumni Career Services. Welcome to the Networking for Success webinar. Briefly, some logistics about today. We will present from 1 until 2:15, and I'll break for questions a couple of times. I'll talk about how to do that in a minute. But we'll also be available to stay on the line until 2:30 if there are additional questions or points for discussion. A little bit about me. I've been with Alumni Career Services at Tufts for 16 years. Before that, worked primarily as a career coach in various settings, including corporate outplacement. I also spent 5 years at Mass General as an internal HR recruiter. Working with Tufts Alumni Career Services, we have three major goals. One is to present programs like this, including webinars and some in-person networking events for all alumni, all schools. Two is to foster networking and connections between alumni and between alumni and students, including a new online resource for alumni to student networking called The Herd. Details are on our website and also the Tufts Alumni website and at the bottom of that email from Nicole that you received about the presentation. And three is we provide individual career coaching services for graduates of arts, sciences, and engineering and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. Now, a little more about today's webinar. As I said, you can ask questions anytime by using the Q&A option on your computer screen. You can just type in whatever question is maybe a clarification about something I'm saying or something I haven't mentioned yet that you want me to cover, anything. And I'll pause a few times to respond to the questions. And again, we'll be available later than 2:15 for additional questions if you have them. In addition, we'll be recording this webinar and it will be posted on our website. And we have some additional topics that have already been recorded in the spring or in this fall that are posted up on the website. So briefly, the agenda. What is networking? Why is it important? Basic networking tools, my top 11 networking tips. I thought it was going to be top 10, but then there turned out to be 11. A little bit of some basics about informational interviewing and some next steps, setting goals, getting support, some web resources and books that I know about or have found useful in the past, and again, more questions and discussion. So networking is a big topic and involves a lot of parts and pieces. Today's seminar, just to let you know what I'll be covering, is going to focus primarily on some tools and approaches to make networking at events of different kinds more effective for you, and about informational interviewing. We won't have time to talk in detail about online tools and resources such as LinkedIn and Twitter, but I will certainly be mentioning the fact that they are an extension or another way to connect and be visible and build relationships that are important for networking. So what is it? Well, it's not asking for a job. And reading a quote from a book is not usually seen as the best way to do a training or a workshop, but I really love this book. It's Make Your Contacts Count by Baber and Wayman. It's listed in my books list at the end of the PowerPoint. And what they say is networking is the deliberate process of exchanging information, resources, support, and access in such a way as to create mutually beneficial relationships for personal and professional success. And the reason I read it in that way is that I really like that they mention and stress that it's a reciprocal, ideally a reciprocal relationship. That's not always easy, particularly if you're a recent grad or perhaps you're researching or wanting to enter a new field or new industry. You may not think you have ways to help or resources or information that can be useful to the other person. I'm just suggesting that as a mental framework. And there certainly are plenty of stories I've heard about times when a young person or a person switching industries does have information that's helpful. For example, there was a new grad who had studied abroad and worked, or recent grad who had studied abroad and then worked and been part of the JET program in Japan. And she was returning from the JET program after 1 to 2 years abroad and was meeting with one of her professors really for advice and information about where she should be job searching, how she could use her Japanese in the job market in America. And the professor gave her some ideas and leads, but also wanted to pick her brains about her experiences abroad because his own daughter was thinking about study abroad and work abroad in Japan. So, yes, the Japanese professor in Medford had a lot of information and ideas for the US job market, but she had information and resources that was fresh and helpful for him personally. So don't think that you have nothing to offer just because you're entering a new field or a new area. The next thing that networking is again a request for information and you hope referrals. Referrals meaning an introduction or a connection to another person who could be have useful information or feedback or advice. And the third point that Baber and Wayman talk about is ideally it's a relationship that builds over time, giving you an opportunity to show your competence and your credibility, how you interact or know this person over time. Now, obviously, if you're researching a new area, talking to a number of different people, not every relationship will deepen or build over time, but again, just to don't think of it as a one-shot transactional deal, but look for the opportunities to build. Why is networking important? Well, you all are signed up or listening online to this presentation. You hear about it in business press, you hear about it in articles and features of different kinds, or if you've been reading books or articles about the job search, then you know that this world out there, and this has been true for a while, it's a kind of confusing job market because on the one hand, you see a lot of information, you see a lot of online job ads. Job ads are more easily findable than ever before, certainly compared to 20 years ago because of online job postings and companies listing their jobs online. However, it's still true. It's kind of a mirage or an illusion because you think all the information is there because you see so much out there about jobs and job ads. But still, most information is not in advertised job form. And what I mean by information is information about a company or an organization's needs. So for example, in many bureaucratic or structured organizations, when they are planning to list a job opening on their website and post that job opening or advertise it in some way, there's a whole bureaucratic process to go through to get there. The manager has to get approval to spend that money. Even if it's a position that's already been approved and they're just replacing the person, there's still a process of signatures or approval, and that takes time. So in that time delay between manager knows they want to hire and position is allowed to be advertised, it can be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks when that information is there, but it's not out in the public. So that's sort of the most clear example. Also, networking is a way talking to people, building new relationships or deepening the relationships and colleague connections that you already have. It helps you achieve goals, both personal and professional. Learning information that you need to learn, learning about what the trends are in your industry or your area, what's going to be happening next year, next 5 years, that you can be prepared and positioned for. And it helps you build experience and confidence because you'll be telling your story as you continue to learn. You'll be refining your understanding of what's what we call your value proposition. How are you making a difference, or how could you make a difference to an organization, to your industry, your sector, not just today, but as things move into the future. So, some networking myths. I call them myths because they're not blanketly true across the board. So for example, it's manipulative. Well, actually, a networking conversation can be manipulative if you're not open, transparent, and honest about your agenda, not just what information you're seeking, but why and how you're going to use the information. When you are transparent and clear about that, it's a simple ask. And again, the other thing that helps it not be manipulative in addition to honesty is looking for that opportunity to help, to have there be an exchange of some kind. Another myth is, this is only for extroverts, those people who like to gab, who are good at schmoozing. First of all, I hate that word schmoozing, right? It just sounds gross. Um, but the truth is, yes, there are aspects of the networking process. For example, some extroverts or people with a preference for extroversion may be more comfortable at talking to a stranger, may be more comfortable entering a room full of strangers, although not necessarily. Even people that like to talk or connect with new people may still be shy or unsure about entering that room. And the other truth is, so yes, some aspects of the connecting, the building, the relationship, the talking are easier for some extroverts, but it doesn't mean they're better at it, because if they rely on their gift of gab, and I include myself in this group, they sometimes may not do the careful, thoughtful preparation, the research beforehand, before the one-on-one meeting or before the group meeting, to think about who's going to be there, what do I want to say to them, how do I want to present myself, what questions do I want to ask. Sometimes introverts are better at thoughtful preparation, keeping track of what's happened in the conversation or the meeting, and then thoughtful follow-up. So there are strengths and gifts that each style offers, and but definitely do not assume that the other people somehow have it all figured out, or are doing it all really well. They may not be, because the thoughtful preparation, then the talking and listening, and then the follow-up is all part of it. Another myth that's common, they won't want to talk to me. Well, actually, sometimes that's true, right? Not everyone wants to talk to everyone. Or like the next one, they're too busy to talk to me. Sometimes some people are too busy. What's the mistake and the myth part of it is making it too global, making it too broad. You don't know if someone wants to talk to you, but you can ask, right? And there are polite ways to ask. For example, asking for a short length of time for a conversation, or if it's at a group setting, not monopolizing the person, but asking to follow up and talk to them later. Um, if someone is too busy, sometimes you can predict based on the time of year, right? January or tax time is not the best time to talk to some financial professionals, depending on if they're doing year-end planning or tax time planning. But again, if they're too busy, you may be able to arrange a later time. You don't want to assume either a personal reaction or a blanket reaction. The other thing about the they won't want to talk to me myth is sometimes it helps to ask yourself, has anyone ever asked you for advice about something? Maybe someone that wasn't a close friend. Maybe they were a Tufts alum. Maybe they were an acquaintance or a friend of a friend. Um, and how did that feel to you? Were there times when it felt good or you enjoyed it? Were there times when you didn't? Um, Most people tell me that times when they didn't enjoy it or didn't find the process a positive one, if they were the one providing the information or the advice meeting, is if the other person, for example, monopolized them, took up too much of their time, or didn't communicate in a respectful and professional way. For example, making a clear arrangement of when to talk and then not showing up. I mean, that's an extreme example. But other people, like I love it when I do in the past, workshops or events, networking events with a large room full of Tufts alums. And I know I can look out at the room and I can say, how many of you have offered one of these networking advice meetings to a Tufts student or a Tufts alum? A bunch of hands go up. And then I ask them, if they're comfortable to speak about what that was like for them, why they do it, and and I get some really nice testimonials. So Not that 100% of people will want to talk to you 100% of the time, but there really is people like talking about themselves, people like to help, as long as, again, that ask is appropriate for information, for advice, and not, hey, I really need a job, can you hire me, right? That's not comfortable for anyone. Next myth that I've heard people say, I tried networking, it didn't work. Usually when I drill down into that to ask them to tell me what they did, typical example would be the young man who was been out of school about 2 years, computer science major. And when he was first going out on the job market, he talked to 5 of his friends who had graduated the year before. 3 of their companies were hiring. They put his resume into the employee referral system or took it to their boss, and he had a couple of offers and a job. Then economy took a dip, got laid off. He contacted the same 5 people, plus a couple of others that were in his year, and it didn't work because those exact companies weren't hiring at that time. So what we talked about, and what I talk about in that case is, yes, you start with your inner circle, close friends, relatives, but then you need to broaden out from that. And that's where it might be Tufts alumni that you don't necessarily know, or friends of friends, or contacts of friends or family, again, that you don't necessarily know. So the usually when someone says it didn't work, what I find happening is that they're sticking within their inner circle of people they know well, which is, of course, a great place to be because they'll return your phone call, they'll return your email. But you also need to move out from that. But pay attention. The reason I highlight and spend a little time on these is pay attention to what the voices in your head are saying, whether it's they won't want to talk to me or I can't do this, it's for extroverts. Pay attention to that voice and then look for information or resources to counteract it. If you're not feeling confident about it, it may be that you need more help coming up with your script of what you're going to say or in your email or what you're going to ask in the networking meeting. And those are resources we have on our website, and I'll also suggest other ones. So sometimes the barrier isn't so much a myth as an I don't know what to say or how to do this, but pay attention to what the voices are saying so you can counteract them. Now I'm going to talk a little about some tools that are in many ways most often used at events. And in different forms, it could be a social event, a party. More often it may be a professional association meeting or a conference or an industry event, some sort of business event where people are there maybe to learn something, but also many of them are there to connect or learn from or with each other. The first tool that I mentioned is business cards. You can certainly use the ones from your workplace if that's appropriate, if your workplace has them. You can make your own using vistaprint.com, very reasonable price. Moo.com is more expensive, but they are gorgeous. So, and you can use your own design, your own artwork, or you can use theirs. Take a look and see what Vistaprint is perfectly appropriate, attractive, and professional. And you can make it very simple just with your name and contact information, or you can have a line that tells kind of what you can do, not necessarily a job title, because that may be too narrow. So for example, when I was job searching some years back before I came to Tufts, my line under my name was career coaching, training, and recruiting. Because even though I didn't want to be recruiting full time, I knew I would take some contract recruiting assignments, and that I liked. What I really wanted was career coaching and training. And then I had my contact details, including LinkedIn. Next, names are important. Learn their name, teach your name. Now, Baber and Wayman in Make Your Contacts Count have some nice section in a chapter on this where you might think of a way to come up with kind of a mnemonic or a story about your name that's brief. You might, to learn their name, you repeat it a couple of times. You look at their name tag, you say, Mary Smith. Okay, Mary Smith at Curry College. Great to meet you. If you're bad at names, which I am sometimes guilty of, and you try to rely on other things. So, for example, ask for the business card. We'll talk about that after the conversation. That can help. But also, if I know I've met somebody and I'm blanking on their name, I'll say, "Oh, I know we met at last year's conference. You're from Hawaii, right?" If you can remember something that shows that you do know the person, that helps them feel, recognized, even if you're not so great at names. And again, in many professional events, people will have name tags, which is super helpful. The tagline, again, this is primarily for a business event, a professional event of some kind, something to say after your name. So, for example, let's say I am new in town. I might say, I'm Leslie Warner, I'm a career coach, and I'm at this event because I'm new in town and I want to learn more about the professional environment and professional associations for career counselors, right? If I'm at a career counselor's professional event. You sort of tailor it to what it is. It might be, how do you relate to me? Might be, for example, let's say it's a corporate event at your company. I'm Leslie Warner. My department does the financial accounting and services for your department, or whatever that might be. So you think about and the key to preparing and practicing it beforehand is to make sure it's short. Right? If I'm saying I'm new in town, it's not going to be the whole story of why I moved from Chicago and what kind of job opportunity I'm looking for. And, no, this is a short little thing like I'm this and here's why I'm here, or something along those lines. More things to prepare beforehand. And again, these are things that if you start the question, what do you do? Very common in American business culture, American even social culture. Less common in Europe or some other countries where they're not so focused on what you do in your work is going to define you. But still, a lot of the common answers to what do you do are like conversation stoppers. What do you do? I'm a financial analyst. Well, you may think you know what that is, but it's different in different companies. What are they analyzing and for who, right? If you start paying more attention and listening to how other people are introducing yourselves, you'll see some of those seeming extroverts, seemingly comfortable talking, aren't always doing it in a really effective or clear way, right? Maybe they'll say a whole lot about what they do that may be more detailed than the person wants. Think about what you do best. And think about like the simple part of the what do you do is who do you help and what do you help them with, right? So I might say I help Tufts alumni manage and develop their careers. It's one way I might put it. Or I might, if I'm wanting to speak more broadly, I might say I help people um, figure out and move towards their career goals and dreams. Tweaking the language depending on who the audience is, where I am, because I do have a small private practice outside of my Tufts work. So, I might want to say it in a broader way and then narrow it in. So, who do you help and what do you help them with? And then the best test, that's the advanced. Once you're comfortable with the who do you help and what do you help them with, the best test, again, Baber and Wayman do a great job explaining this and giving some good examples. This is the advanced version. It's being able to say one thing you do best and a short testimonial to your talents. Something like, I help businesses get their message out to potential customers. Most recently, I helped a CPA client get featured in a story in the Boston Globe business section. And what about you? What are you working on now, right? It can feel braggy, it can feel uncomfortable, but if you say something simple and to the point, and then be truly, interested and curious about the other person, it's really not. You're trying to draw them out and find out what they are excited about, what they're challenged by, what they're working on. A quick note, if you hate your job, talk more about what you do like. maybe a piece of your work that you enjoy or want to do more of, or maybe you focus what you're saying on, what your goal is and what you want to move towards, particularly if you're at a networking or professional event in the direction you'd like to move. Again, it takes scripting, it takes practice to be ready. Nobody is great at this off the cuff. Another quick example was about the who do you help and what do you help them with is a young woman who was a pharmaceutical salesperson, and she decided saying I'm in pharmaceutical sales didn't really capture what she wanted to say, so she started saying I sell drugs with a smile. And well, that was vivid, that was memorable, but she decided it didn't leave, and then she would explain, further in the conversation, she decided it didn't leave the most professional impression. Um, so she modified it and said something along the lines of, I help doctors and clinicians make the best decisions about medicine for their patient care. Uh, Something like that. So again, just remember, she's selling through the doctors, right? Although it gets a little confusing when you see those ads on TV marketing to the consumer, right? But the consumer isn't going out to buy that medicine. So think about that. Who do you help? What do you help them with? And then practice saying it out loud. So before we jump into this, I'm just going to double check and see if we have any questions. Nope, not yet. Again, feel free to type questions in at any time. More about preparing for events. What will we talk about? Okay, after the what do you do, your agenda. And what I suggest, and again, inspired by Baber and Wayman, when you prepare your agenda ahead of time for an event, professional association, conference, even a holiday party, if you're really in an active, learning or engaging mode, you really increase your chances of having an interesting conversation, perhaps being able to help others achieve a goal or learn something that they want to learn or connect with something they want to connect with, and achieving your own goals. When I hear people say, they went to a networking event and it was terrible and waste of time, sometimes it truly was a poorly organized and poorly set up event where there just wasn't time or structure to talk to people. Most of the time, though, what I find is people really haven't prepared ahead of time about what they want to learn and why and how they're going to achieve that. And I did just get one question come in that said, if I could repeat what the pharmaceutical salesperson said. Her first one was, I sell drugs. Decided it was, while it was vivid and memorable, which is good, you want to be vivid and memorable, it was not very professional. So she switched it to, I help physicians make the best, I help physicians have the best possible information to make good decisions about medicines for their patients. Something like that. Make the best available information to make decisions about medications for their patients. So you think, who are you serving? And who are you talking to too, So anyway, we're back to preparing your agenda. So before the event, write down. And it's helpful if this is in some sort of format that you can have in your bag or in your car, 5x8 piece of paper even. What can you give? What do you have to offer to other people at this event? Is it a resource or an opportunity? The obvious ones are, job opportunities at your organization, but you think of other ones too. What's the area of the organizational or business world that you have knowledge in? That's something you have to offer, your knowledge of this area. Is there a new project or a new initiative that you've been part of recently at your organization? That's another thing you have knowledge about that you could share. It can also be personal. Maybe you just recently adopted a puppy and you've really been learning a ton about how to train and work with a new puppy. Is everyone in the room going to want to hear about your puppy? No, but maybe it's something you enjoy talking about, and maybe somebody will be. I had a colleague who always on her give list, she had downhill skiing and competitive ballroom dancing because she loved those things and she had taken a lot of lessons. So she knew a lot about where to take lessons, how to get involved at any level, and get started. And she really was a resource to other people at events that she would go to, including professional events. So don't rule out a personal project or a hobby as a resource. I had one young woman at an event that I hosted, a Tufts alum, where one of her big give thing, that one of them that she put down was great recipes for tofu. Another person wrote down, ask me about China, because he had been living in China for a number of years and working in the business sector. Both of those were popular with some folks. And what do you hope to get? And I specifically ask you to write down the give first, again, to set that framework of giving, helping, sharing, and then what you hope to get. You can't just put down a job in PR in New York, right? You can, but your odds of getting that specific job lead at this exact event, even if it's a PR related event, maybe yes, maybe no. You want to think, wait, do you want to meet people, meet more people who have connections to PR in New York? Do you want to um, check out the newsletters or professional association, resources related to PR in New York that you know about to see if other people know about other resources, right? Um, think about what type of resources or people or information you're looking for and how can you write that down. What people find is if you write it down, it helps you remember it in the moment in the event, and you're more likely to think of those kinds of topics when you're in the middle of the conversations. So top 11 networking tips. Number one, do your homework. I've alluded to this a little bit and certainly talked about planning your strategy with your agenda. Again, not a manipulative, controlling agenda, more what do you hope to talk about? What do you have to offer? Um, but you also, some events will let you research the RSVP list before the event. And sometimes that takes a little time if you have to go through a few clicks or plug the name back into LinkedIn to see. But it's really helpful if you think, who do you most want to talk to? Maybe you can identify specific people that you are signed up to be there. That's super helpful. If not, maybe you can get the RSVP list either at the event or afterwards. It's still helpful, right? Set your goals, write the agenda. We discussed that. Web to web. Okay, part of your first impression is your physical presence, your posture, your facial expressions, your dress. And part of it is that Western business culture, that firm handshake. Actually, it sounds silly, but I recommend that you practice with a friend and ask for honest feedback, because sometimes you may not realize that you're squeezing hard and it could be painful, or that it comes across as wimpy or less than confident. We talked about introducing yourself in a way that's interesting and brief. Who do you help? What do you help them with? Now, preparing conversation starters, this is kind of like icebreakers. So if there's a way to go beyond sports and weather, it's nice, right? And you can find lists of these kinds of conversation starters on websites, web articles about, how to start a networking conversation, how to talk to people at events. Some of the common ones are things like, what are you looking forward to? That's a nice one, particularly at a social event, because it doesn't presume that people are, working professionally in their ideal career or at all. Um, Act like a host. This isn't in a bossy or I'm in charge of this event way. It's more like you can enter the room and look around and think, do I see somebody standing alone that I could approach proactively and find out what brings them there? You're not saying what's your agenda, because other people may not have come to this workshop, but you're asking them, what brings them to this event? What are they hoping to get out of it or learn from it? And you may be able to actually help them with their agenda. Keeping it short, this is not everybody does this. If you're having a great conversation and you're feeling comfortable, right? That's more comfortable than moving on. But we recommend you don't want to monopolize somebody, and you don't have to be setting your watch, but moving it along after a little while, and can ask for that business card. And if you want to follow up later, say that you would like to. If you don't want to, you don't have to promise that. um, it's helpful to write a note on the back of the card. If you talk to a few different people, even if it's just two or three, it's really helpful to write, oh, just had twins, send article about Hawaii, right? Maybe you talked about something personal they're looking forward to, and you have a resource that could be helpful for their vacation. Or um, just be careful about other cultures. There are some cultures, like I'm aware in some Asian cultures, writing on someone, like Japan, writing on someone's business card that they've just given you is seen as rude. Um, So check about culture issues if you're dealing with other cultures, but in this culture, yeah, I highly recommend it, because then you know what to do for follow-up or something you want to remember. Graceful exits is getting out of a conversation when the other person isn't showing any signs of tiring or moving on. Um, it can be as simple as, it's been really good to talk to you and meet you and hear about the projects you're working on at work. Good to meet you, and stick your hand out to shake their hand goodbye and then turn away. So again, one simple. Asking for the business card could be a way to wrap up the conversation. It's been really nice meeting you. Would you like to exchange business cards to stay in touch? If you want to, you can also use an action like, it's been really nice talking with you, Jane. I'm planning to go over and get another drink, but they may follow you, which is okay, except you haven't necessarily exited. The other thing you can do is bring in your agenda and say, it's been really great talking with you, Sue. One of the reasons I came to this event is I wanted to meet the speaker, and I can see she's over there talking to a couple of folks. I'm going to go over and say hello. Would you like to join me? So you can invite the person along to your agenda, one way. Um, Follow up, again, if you said you would do something, write that note so that you can go home and do it, preferably within 24 hours. I say a thank you note. Usually it's going to be email. It could be a request to connect on LinkedIn. Good to talk to you last night at the such and such event. Look forward to staying in touch on LinkedIn. Boom. Um, One thing, if you definitely want to be connected and in touch, if you only send the LinkedIn request to connect, some people are active and paying attention on LinkedIn and some aren't. So you might want to send the email, mentioning that it was nice to meet them, a nugget from the conversation, and saying, I'll also send you a request to connect on LinkedIn. That way you help help them notice you on LinkedIn too. And again, looking for ways to help, offering to help the other. And that's overall, not just at events. Before we move to the informational interview, I'll check and see if there's any. I see a question. Let's see. Okay, this is a great question. This person says, I'm a recent grad. When attending events with the intent of job searching, what's the most important, appropriate way to ask strangers for help with this? Great question. And that's actually a good segue into the informational interview, because um, what you're asking for when you're in the job search, what you're asking for from other people is advice, right? Or insight or perspective, right? Advice is sort of the overarching word. So, for example, if you meet someone at an event, and let's say I'll use my PR example there, you say, what, as a new grad, one of the areas I'm really excited about researching and learning more about and hopefully getting into is public relations. Um, it's been really nice talking to you here. Would you be open? I'd love to follow up with you later and perhaps set up a time when we could talk for a few more minutes. to learn more about your PR career and get your advice for my job search, right? So it's perfectly appropriate to say, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking in X and Y areas, or, you sort of tailor it to who you're talking to, right? And I'd love to be able to talk with you later to learn more about how it works at your company or about your career path, right? And if you are a new or recent grad, again, you can make your own business cards. If you don't have them yet and you're going to an event tomorrow, that's okay. Ask for theirs. Um, and then you follow up and ask. So that's the quick answer. But again, practice, write yourself a little script, not to memorize exactly. For most of us, memorizing doesn't sound so great unless we're a professional actor, but so that you know what are your key points? What are you trying to say? It's not a full, long introduction. It's a short statement about who you are, why you're at that event, or what you're looking to do, right? And then if you get to the point in the conversation where you're making an ask, right? Even if it's a professional focused event, you wouldn't necessarily want to follow up and have a conversation with every single person you talk to, or maybe you do. But here, again, another quick pro tip. Let's say you're able to get an RSVP list at the event or afterwards. And let's say you look at that RSVP list and you see, oh, this is a person who I would have loved to talk to and learn more about their company, get their advice for my job search, but I didn't talk to them at the event. You can still email them with that contact from the RSVP list and say, Dear so-and-so, I was at the such and such event. I didn't get a chance to meet you and talk with you then, but I'd love to learn more about what you do. I'm a recent grad from Tufts, hoping to do blah, blah, blah. And I see on LinkedIn that you do blah, blah, blah. I'd love to, if you had time for a brief meeting or phone call, I'd love to get your advice as I start my PR career. That's my sort of off the cuff version. You can find, more precise versions of, what this email would look like, because it's similar to the email you might send to a Tufts alum that you don't know. But there at the event RSVP list, your connection is you're not necessarily both Tufts alums, but you both were signed up to attend this event and you might have met them there. You just didn't get a chance to talk to everyone. So great question, thanks. And again, there's at the end of the presentation, there's book lists and article suggestions, and our website has suggestions too about how to get started. It just takes practice. But being your sincere self of, I'm looking for a job in X and I like to talk to people to get their advice and learn more about the field. That's a natural calling card. So shifting gears a little bit to the informational interview. This is a one-on-one meeting, usually initiated and set up by you, the learning person or job seeker or just person who wants to expand your network. Occasionally you may have one of these that gets brokered by somebody else, a relative, but still, if you're the person who is seeking to learn or seeking to get advice or information, or hopefully referrals, it's your meeting, your agenda. A chance to learn more about what I call the industry, which includes government, includes nonprofits, right? I just mean the sector, the area, specific market trends. Market trends means, it could be anything like a economic or national issue or trend, or it could be something that's more like an industry change or trend that's happening, or it could be things affecting just this company or organization, right? You want to know what's happening. What are the needs now? What are the needs going to be? Where do your skills best fit? At some companies, it's literally, or organizations literally figuring out what are the job titles that I should be looking at? Where do my ability to solve a problem or contribute fit with the organization, right? And that can be different. And you're hoping to build a relationship. This might be someone you don't know that is a Tufts alum, or it might be a friend of a friend. And this is the first step. You are talking to get their insight, perspective, referrals, those words I use, not asking for a job, but you're again transparent and open about what phase you're at. So for example, let's say you've been home taking care of family members or kids for some years, and you're truly in exploration and research mode. You're not sure which direction you're going to head, but you want to learn more about current state of the publishing industry, knowing that it's gone through a lot of upheaval and changes. Um, and you want to learn more maybe about some other areas too. So then you would say, you're not saying you're looking for advice for your job search, you're saying you're looking for advice and information to help you learn about and explore publishing as a possible career field as you re-enter the work, as you plan to re-enter the workforce, right? So you think, are you at research exploration phase? Say that. Are you at, I'm looking to, I love your company and I love what you do and I'd like to learn more about it. I think it's a place I'd love to work. You're asking for advice and feedback about, again, your potential skill fit or who you should be talking to learn more about the industry, the companies, the trends, right? And then you always offer, please let me know, like if it's thanking them for after the meeting and during the meeting while you're talking, you say, please let me know if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you. And sometimes you'll be able to think proactively about a resource or information you have that might be helpful to the other person. Other times not, but just keep that in your frame. So you're preparing to do informational interviewing. One step is listing all of your existing contacts. And, you'll have, if you're already using LinkedIn, or you have your own, way of managing or listing contacts, you already have a lot of this information, but I encourage you to take a few minutes to do a full brainstorm where you put at the top of a page friends and then just quickly list the first name of every friend you can think of. And then coworkers, former coworkers, brainstorm again, list the names of everyone you can think of. And then even relatives, right? And people you know from the dog park and people you know from the religious organization you go to sometimes, or people you know from a club that you are part of or were part of. Think about every group or every affiliation you have, put the name at the top of the page and then brainstorm the names. And the reason is, I promise you, you know more people than you think you do. And when you start writing the names of, say, colleagues, former colleagues, or friends, you'll remember more. That's how the mind works. When you start doing this brainstorm with yourself process, you'll remember more of these folks. And then you take those contacts and you prioritize them. So proximity is awesome. That means they're close to you. They care about you, maybe even love you. They will go to some degree, go the extra mile, or at least answer your phone call and your email right away. And you can ask them for help and for more legwork and to extend your eyes and ears. And that's great. But those people may not be positioned, right, in the exact departments or organizations that you want to work for. Those are the people on your list who have perspective. Those are the ones who are in the right companies, right industry, right job functions or areas. The third type of contact and way to categorize is people with power. That might be, say, an associate of one of like your spouse's family. An example was someone I worked with whose wife's family was old family friends with a person that owned the Cleveland Cavaliers and was a big business person with a lot of wealth and power. Now, he didn't know him personally at all. Not every member, and his wife didn't actually know the person very well at all, but parents and family members of the family had known him for many years. And so we talked about how they were relocating to Cleveland, and this was somebody he would want to do some good legwork and homework first before reaching out to Mr. Big owner of sports team, because you want to use his time efficiently and you want to have done some research and legwork and talking to other people in your target area first, because it wasn't that he wanted to work for this guy, it's that he thought he might be able to open some doors to some introductions. So we strategized about that. So powerful contacts are great, but you want to really be ready, you want to be prepared, and you want to don't go to them first. Really do the legwork. So is one type better than another? Well, obviously, somebody who's close to you and has information and perspective on your target job function, target industry is perfect. But if you're just getting started with this and want to build confidence, start with the friends and relatives, even if they don't seem connected to your goal. Build your confidence. You can also start with people that are closer to peers or near peers, right? Who may not have much power to hire you, but may have influence or recommendation power or employee referral power, or definitely can give you information about what I like to say, even a brand new grad who's been hired somewhere knows about their hiring process and what they went through and the resources and things that they learned in the job search. Um, so then also preparing for this informational interview. When I have people who feel like, oh, I'm bad at networking or I don't know how to do this, some of it is really doing the homework to know who you are, what assets you bring, what are the skills you have, what are the accomplishments you've had as a student or as a person in perhaps a different field, what are the areas you have knowledge of. Um, and you want to know as much as you can about this target function, target industry. And again, industry in the broadest sense before you talk to the person. If it's a new area that you're researching, there are things you can learn by reading online. You can learn things by reading people's profiles on LinkedIn in that industry and job function, as if they've put a lot of details in. You can learn things from, if you're really brand new to the area and have no idea what a respiratory therapist does, since that isn't something people study at Tufts. You can read government documents, books which are now available online, Occupational Outlook Handbook, which tells what a person does, what the training is to get there, right? Some professions also have many of them have a professional association website, anything from the National Association of Social Workers to physician's assistants, um, to plumbers, that will tell you what's the training required, what's the licensing required, sort of these basic information questions. You don't want to be asking those. Um, And when I say if you don't know your target function industry, craft questions to research this, what I mean there is, again, if you're in that I'm exploring, I'm researching phase where you're not sure what your target is going to be, then you do at least the base level research and then craft the questions. What advice would they have if you were going to try to enter that field from where you are now, and what you would need to get there. Um, One of the areas where people are doing a lot of this type of research, as well as more targeted, is all kinds of opportunities are out there for data analytics. Well, what does that mean at company A versus company B versus government department C? What does it mean? What skills and expertise are they looking for? It is a college major now at Tufts and other places, but it wasn't until very recently, so they're not requiring a major. How much computer science or software or technology background is required? Which ones? And it really varies from company or industry to different area. So it's takes research. Um, Tell me about yourself. Another thing to prepare. This is your 2-minute or 90-second introduction of yourself when you're sitting in a room or on the phone, one-on-one. 2 minutes can be a little bit long, especially on the phone. It's just that here's who I am, here's what's most important about me right now. accomplishments, key skills from your background, and then what what you're there to learn about or ask about. Again, you script it ahead of time, not to read from a script, but to practice saying out loud. You set the agenda for the meeting. And this, you can have your notebook right there if it's an in-person coffee or meeting. In-person is always preferable if you can get it, right? It helps a person build that feeling of comfort with you. It helps you build a relationship more. However, people's busy lives doesn't always work. So then your default would be phone. Email is more for kind of follow-up questions, quick follow-up questions later in general. Again, we talked about researching the industry company in person before the meeting. If this is really a high potential meeting, even though it's not a job interview, you can go beyond the company website, beyond LinkedIn, and go to what some of you may have heard if you've heard these presentations before in other topics, have heard me talk about the full text business and trade press articles, particularly for researching, company information or industry trends. And you can get those at many public libraries. Just spend 5 minutes with the reference librarian, finding out which database has the articles from business and trade press. And they're then searchable by keyword and subject area. And that's super helpful, very crucial before a job interview. And I'm just suggesting, build it in earlier if this is a strategic meeting. I say 15 to 20 minutes. If you read articles and books, you'll see some might say 20 to 25, some might say half an hour. It's more the idea of being very respectful of their time. That even though, as I say, people generally enjoy talking about themselves and their work, um, you if you say I don't want to I'll take no more than 20 minutes of your time, you do set a timer, you do watch it, and a few minutes before the end of that time start signaling the wrap up. Then if they twist your arm and they say, oh no, I've booked out more time, do you have more questions? Great, you have more questions in your notebook, right there, ready to go. The thank you follow-up email is very important. It's part of bread and butter etiquette, politeness. Thank you for meeting with me. But it's also helping to build the relationship and your professional impression. You tell them a little bit, very briefly, about what you plan to do with the resources, the introduction, the information, whatever they specifically suggested. And then this is the advanced follow-up. Another way to build the relationship is, let's say they recommend a website and a company for you to check out and a person that you should connect with, who they say you can use their name or they offer to introduce you. Then you write again each time you've read that article or checked out that company or met that person. And they may hit reply and give you more people to connect with or more resources. Sometimes consciously or unconsciously, people are being kind of precious with their personal professional contacts, but they'll share more when they see you handle them professionally. I had a wonderful question from one young man once in one of these workshops, one of these webinars, where he said, what's the precise maximum number of these follow-up thank yous that you should do in a 1 week period? And I had to really stop and think, because you're not going to do more than one a week. Definitely. You don't want to be inundating the person with little messages. On the other hand, you want to trust your own intuition and feeling about the rhythm. Sometimes writing to them once a week for 3 weeks when you complete 3 actions might feel a little too much. You could stretch it out a bit. The idea is just to give them that quick note to say what happened with the information they shared with you. And then seeking to help. This is again part of advanced follow-up. Is there an article, what I call the non-obvious article, that you can find that is, or a resource that is related to their interests, their immediate challenges professionally or personally, if personal topics or plans came up? Again, it's not the, New York Times or Wall Street Journal front page article from last week, um, but maybe it's from more of a niche publication with an angle, a helpful angle or idea or resource about their project or their issues that they're dealing with. Sometimes it takes a little legwork and a little time on your part. Again, you can use those full text article databases to look for article resources, but it's worth it. And as you develop, especially if you're researching one particular area, you may come up with an article where you go, oh, this is great. And then you look at your list of people you've um, been having informational interview or networking meetings with, and you may see, oh, I can send this follow up and send this same article to 4 people on my list. Again, and you can check your spreadsheet to see when was the last time you emailed them to make sure it wasn't yesterday. But that's a way that helps, genuinely can be helpful. Um, Another way to follow up in a helpful way is, let's say it is a Tufts alum and you live in the same city, you will want to be checking those lists of upcoming events for Tufts alumni. If you see an upcoming event, you can forward the announcement about it to Tufts alums on your list and customize the invite with, I'm planning to attend this Tufts alumni event. And I thought you might also be interested. If you are planning to attend, let me know. And then you could either invite them to meet up for coffee before the event, if there's time, or connect at the event, right? You can even do it if you can't attend. You can say, I can't attend this upcoming event, but I thought I'd forward it along to you in case you thinking you might be interested. And what's interesting is, again, this information about Tufts alumni events, it's available to all alumni. It's on the website. It gets pushed out either through digests or emails or newsletters, but people are in such information overload that singling out, an upcoming professional association or alumni association event and forwarding along the invite actually is a helpful thing. I had, again, a young alum who sent an info about this, about something related to water resources engineering. And the person she sent it to was, more established in the field, and you would have thought would have been all over this event and known all about it, but they hadn't, because it was kind of a niche event on the MIT campus. And anyway, they really appreciated the invite. Even if they already know, it's still helpful, but trust me, they don't always already know, or even if it's in their inbox, they may not have read it. So another way to be helpful and possibly connect at the event. I'm going to check to see if we have more questions coming in. I don't see any yet. So, talking briefly about online networking, again, recognizing that we don't have time to do an in-depth presentation here about the online networking. There is a recorded webinar about getting started with LinkedIn. In most industries, in most sectors, LinkedIn is the way people learn about each other, a way to be visible, sometimes be helpful in groups on LinkedIn related, especially groups related to your profession, your function, but also to find people and be found, and connect. Then think about what else will be appropriate. For many of us, Twitter is sort of the next step, after you feel comfortable on LinkedIn or you're already using LinkedIn. And Twitter can be everything from following professionals that you admire or that you want to learn from or with, whether they're peers or more um, senior level executives or thought leaders in your field. You can follow companies that you're interested in on Twitter. And then as you develop your comfort there, you start retweeting articles of interest or information posted again by thought leaders or people you admire. But think carefully about your brand, right? This is how do you want to be viewed? If you're using Twitter professionally, you really want to think about how your posts are being viewed and connected with by others. And again, most people start by following and listening in on the conversations and then joining in and forwarding them. And you can find excellent books and articles about using Twitter for professional networking and job search and professional visibility. And again, there may be more specific online forums or websites or locations where people in your field gather. I mean, the perfect example of that is for software folks who have different forums that they check into to help each other. They post questions, technical questions, or and others with knowledge in that area post their answers or suggestions. There are, as I said, professional groups on LinkedIn. There are, but see what's used by your world, right? It may be that in your professional goal area, Instagram or Pinterest is a way that people connect and find each other. See what, for most of us, it's LinkedIn and Twitter. Facebook is sort of a complicated question. At times, Facebook will have a sort of product or a tool available, maybe a better way to put it, to help you like search easily for what companies your friends and connections and their connections work at and learn and connect that way. Some people are more comfortable keeping a big firewall and having Facebook be personal with high privacy settings. Again, read some current and recent articles about it if you're thinking about using Facebook professionally in a big way. An informal way of reaching out to your actual friends on Facebook for advice or feedback or connections is certainly appropriate, but just be careful about your privacy settings. So, setting goals for your next step. Definitely practicing some sort of way to introduce yourself, whether it's a social setting or a professional meeting. Who do you help? What do you help them with? Tell me about yourself is for, again, those one-on-one situations where you have a longer description of yourself. Um, being ready with the tell me about yourself and the who do you help, what do you help them with is so important. Again, all kinds of stories from my experience. I had a client who was waiting in line to rent a boat at a community boating rental place, and the guy in front of her in line in their shorts and sneakers just happened to be a manager at her dream company, and she froze up. She couldn't like figure out how, here we are in our boat clothes, how do I ask him about it? And if you're ready and you're prepared, it really can be as graceful as, wow, that's such an interesting company. I know we're here with our boats, but do you have a business card or contact info on you? I'd love to chat with you later at a later time, more about your company. It can be as simple as that, but it does take being ready. And she vowed, never to be frozen up and not know how to be ready in the moment again. Clarify your agenda before meetings or events. Really helpful to have a more interesting time there, whatever your goals are, personal or helping others. And I didn't talk about this specifically yet. Identify groups like a professional association or an industry association, or perhaps at your company on the job. You want to be actively involved in groups. That is the painless networking, right? Where you can be developing relationships with people, preferably in your field, in your target areas, over time by working together on projects. So that's where joining a committee, seeking leadership roles on a project or a committee is really helpful. Professional association, industry association. I'm a huge fan of conference planning committees because you work together for months often, and it may be over the phone or Skype, but it's still relationships in your field. But whatever works for you. Um, Some of the books I mentioned, these are just some that I'm familiar with and enjoy. One I want to mention is Why Should Extroverts Make All the Money? I know is out of print, at least last time I checked. Sometimes copies are available in libraries and in used on Amazon. A Foot in the Door was written pre-social media, but it's about the informational interviewing process, and so the human communication aspect of it is, I think, very well covered there. Um, the Federica Balzano book, The Extroverts Make All the Money, it's not just for introverts. She has some really great scripts, samples of how people introduce themselves in ways that are, more interesting, more memorable, without selling people you sell drugs. These are just some that I am aware of. Again, you may find others that you find really helpful, and then by all means, shoot me an email, leslie.warner@tufts.edu, to tell me more about resources that you find. Tufts Career Center website, in both student and alumni pages on the website, we have articles and resources and for aspects of networking, LinkedIn, and the informational interview process. Find some really good articles on some of these websites that I mentioned. I put a link to one specific article just because I thought it was an interesting take and covered a lot of points nicely about how to land an ace in informational interview. Interestingly, I think she's the one, some of the articles that I was looking over talk about reaching out by phone rather than by email to request the informational interview. I tend to use email more, but I can also see, the advantage of phone is it's more direct. The challenge is people are often not answering their phone at work unless it's a call they are expecting or they know who it is, right? It's one way to manage how their workday goes. Then again, email is risking being caught in a mountain of people's incoming emails. So if you're using email, really important to word your subject line really thoughtfully to make really clear why they should be interested, right? Recent Tufts grad, jumbo IR major with, seeking blah, blah career information, or whatever the connector is. If your major's the connector, put that in the subject line. If it's just that you're both Tufts grads, put that. If the person referred you and that referral name is known to that person, it's a friend or colleague, definitely put the referral name in the so-and-so suggested I talk with you. So again, there are many good books out there on the job search that have excellent chapters on informational interviewing and networking, because it's a very, very, as you can see, it's a very key part of the process, partly because information is not out there, like about what the actual business needs are. You have to talk to people to learn more about that. And even if there is a job ad, having an inside contact or someone that you have talked with is super helpful to help your resume get looked at, right? And not be lost in that database in the sky. And again, some of it is just having the conversations to expand your group of people that you can tap for help, for advice that you can be helpful to make your work more interesting, more fun, and achieve your goals. Talked about the Herd volunteer to offer information interviews to students. So this is join as an alum to be a resource to students. And then the Tufts Career Networking Group on LinkedIn is people we are requesting that they be available for informational interviews if they join the career networking groups, but you can also look for groups on LinkedIn related to your industry, your job function. The Tufts online community is an alumni directory listing alumni emails, and also has access to some of those library research databases that I said many public libraries have. So those are some of the resources. Thank you for your attention. You're going to be, as your next steps, getting some feedback on your introduction, your who do you help? What do you help them with? How you introduce yourself at events. Ask a friend for feedback. Ask more than one person. Practice your tell me about yourself for one-on-one situations. If you really are trying to achieve a goal of some sort in your networking work, in whether it's a job search or just expanding and developing your network, work with friends or an action team to really commit to specific goals and support each other to meet those goals. Doing it alone, it's pretty easy to have what we call goal slippage, right? Um, and get more information, whether it's articles, books, to increase your confidence as well as reinforcing some of these ideas and other ideas. So I'll check again to see if there are questions that have come in. Oh, here's a good question. Okay. What does TMAY mean? Tell me about yourself. Sorry, I thought I had highlighted it earlier in the presentation, but maybe I didn't. TMAY is tell me about yourself. It's how do you answer that either direct or implied question? How do you start a conversation that might be an informational interview conversation? You're going to need to introduce yourself and give a little bit more information. Okay. Someone asks a great question for one-on-one meetings. If you're asked, tell me about yourself, I struggle with not repeating my resume. Okay, couple of recommendations. I'm going to have, in a couple of weeks, I'll have an entire webinar on your 30, what I call your 30 and 90-second introduction. So I'll give you a lot more tips and ideas there. But some quick ideas are do some reading about it. Look at, again, chapters you can look at a chapter on networking and informational interviewing in job search books. You can look at a chapter, you can look at that tell me about yourself section in an interviewing book. You can, knowing that the interview version is slightly different, it's going to be super customized to that job opportunity in many ways. But specifically look at networking books or articles. Google, how do I, introduce myself in a networking meeting, read the articles, because a few nuggets from your resume are going to be relevant, right? Because you're saying, but it's not just going to be, I did this internship. It's that by doing this internship, I learned a lot about blah, blah. I got built skills in blah, blah, right? And you're also thinking about what can you tell them about yourself that's interesting and relevant, but maybe not featured on the resume, right? Or it might have to do with, what leads you to be interested in talking to this person. Does that reason for being interested in them go back to when you were a kid or in high school? Or is it maybe you used to be interested in something else and then you've recently shifted. I had one young recent grad I was working with who had been pretty focused through most of her Tufts years on being pre-veterinarian and then changed her mind. So she talks a little bit about how her earlier education and internships focused on animals and pre-veterinarian work, and now she became more interested in such and such. So it's a more personal presentation of the most important skills, most important experiences, and how that leads you up to what you're interested in asking them about. So I hope that's helpful. It's very, a few nuggets from your resume are going to be appropriate. You just want to think, well, how do I be a person saying these things? How do those things relate to why I'm here? Which is why my pre-vet person would say, my resume will make it look like I was the pre-vet person, which I was. And recently I sought out this experience because, I've changed, moved in this direction. So I don't see other Q&A yet. Let me double check just to see. There are other questions. Yeah. Thank you for your good questions. Thank you for your attention. And I will send you a quick follow-up email with one format that I like for using a spreadsheet to keep track of your networking contacts, informational interview contacts, because, not all of them will be directly linked to a company you want to work for, right? Maybe they're in a different city, or maybe they're a recruiter that doesn't work in that specific company, or maybe they are a friend of a friend who has a really good sort of overview of the nonprofit world in your city, but you aren't necessarily going to, so they may not be linked, in other words, to a target company that you want to work at, but you still want to keep track of them and again be able to track that follow up. So I'll send that. Good luck taking your next steps and moving forward with your networking. Take care. Bye bye.